By Monday, there will be exactly one severe weather box drawn on the entire map of the United States, and it lands squarely on more than 26 million people, stretching from Chicago all the way to Pittsburgh. Out of a country this big, on an outlook reaching days into the future, forecasters have highlighted only one region, and if you live inside it, that should get your attention. But that single Monday threat is just the finale of a stretch that gets messier with each passing day, from weekend storms firing in the dark to a heat wave building in the south that could push feels-like temperatures to 115 degrees. This is a day-by-day breakdown of everything coming, and I'm going to walk you through all of it so you know exactly what to expect where you live. If that's the kind of forecast you want, subscribe to W for weather right now so you don't miss a single update, because this pattern is going to keep changing. Let's get into it. Let me set the stage, because the whole week hinges on one simple idea. We have an active jet stream firing a series of fast-moving storm systems across the middle of the country and toward the east coast, and at the same time a dome of heat is anchoring the south. Where those two forces meet, you get storms. Where the heat wins, you get danger of a different kind, and the front separating them is going to slide slowly southward as the days go on, dragging the storm threat with it. That's the engine. Now let's follow it one day at a time. We start with today, Saturday. If you're in Kansas City, Omaha, or Des Moines, the setup that's been advertised for a couple of days is right on schedule, and it has pivoted toward you. There's a lower-end severe risk covering more than 5 million people from the Central Plains into the Missouri Valley. But there's a catch, and it's an important one, because it explains why the timing on this is so tricky. There's a layer of warm air sitting up high above the surface, acting like a lid on a pot. That lid suppresses storms during the heat of the day, and the computer models genuinely can't agree on when or where it finally breaks. The real window may not open until after 1 in the morning, when a surge of warm, humid air pushes north and lights up the boundary across the mid-Missouri Valley. So here's how today likely unfolds. Southwestern Iowa has the best shot at afternoon storms, and then a cluster crosses the Missouri River and rolls east, with damaging wind becoming the main threat. There's around 1.5 inches of moisture loaded into the atmosphere overhead, which is a lot, and those storms can keep tracking east along the front all night long. Here's the part that concerns me most. Each new round tends to retrace the last one's path, dropping heavy rain on ground that's already saturated, and all of this is happening while most people are asleep. That combination, repeat storms plus nighttime plus saturated ground, is exactly how flash flooding sneaks up on a community. And that's why I want to say something plainly right now, because it can genuinely save a life. If you live in a flood-prone area or anywhere in that overnight storm corridor, do not rely on your phone alone to wake you. Phones get silenced, apps fail, batteries die, and sirens are designed for people outdoors, not for someone asleep behind closed windows. Have a dedicated way to receive warnings that will physically wake you up in the middle of the night. Overnight flash floods and overnight tornadoes are among the deadliest weather events precisely because they strike when we're least able to react. Take that seriously tonight if you're in the zone. Meanwhile, out east, a small disturbance is going to spark scattered afternoon storms from northern Virginia into eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. If you're out at any outdoor event or festival this weekend in that region, keep this in mind, because these pop-up storms can bring down branches and knock out power in a hurry. Know where the nearest sturdy building is before the sky darkens, not after. It's a small habit that makes a big difference. Now let me hit you with a number, because it's genuinely striking. How does a feels-like temperature of 115 degrees sound? That's what's on tap for the desert Southwest today, driven by a four corners heat dome that ranks in the top 5% of all Augusts on record. And that phrasing matters because, yes, August is always hot in the desert, but this isn't ordinary August heat. Top 5% means this is genuinely extreme relative to the season, which is why heat warnings are already posted through Sunday night. There's an interesting wrinkle, though. Arizona actually gets a bit of a break today, because drier air spilling in off the Rockies knocks the moisture back. So storms will cling to the higher terrain and the border, while the deserts mostly deal with gusty outflow winds and some blowing dust rather than downpours. And up in the northern Rockies, the fuels stay critically dry, which means wildfire smoke keeps streaming southeast. That smoke is thick enough to actually shave a few degrees off temperatures across parts of the Midwest, and it produces those deep, glowing, almost otherworldly sunsets. It's a strange kind of beauty born from something serious happening upwind, and it's worth remembering the cause even while you admire the color. But here's the reward in all of this, because not everywhere is under threat. Today, Minnesota into western Wisconsin is likely the single nicest place in the entire country. High pressure has settled in behind Friday's cold front, and we're talking about highs in the upper 70s to around 80, dew points comfortably in the upper 50s, and barely a breath of wind or a cloud in the sky. The Twin Cities ride the edge in the low 80s. That's a patio dinner. That's a day on the lake. That's the kind of weather you build a whole weekend around. So if that's your part of the country, soak it up, because the calm doesn't last. Because Sunday is when flooding takes over the headline. There's a slight risk of excessive rainfall running from southeastern Minnesota through northern Indiana, and it carries into Monday. The core problem here is repetition. A cluster of storms in the morning, another round Sunday night, nearly 2 inches of moisture sitting overhead, and that is precisely the recipe that floods basements and neighborhoods that were bone dry at breakfast. And here's the thing about this kind of flooding that people underestimate. It happens both fast and slow at the same time. You get a series of intermittent downpours that soak the ground steadily, and then one of them turns torrential. And if you happen to be under that heaviest cell, that's where the serious flash flooding shows up. Severe weather is actually the secondary story on Sunday, but it's still worth watching. There's a marginal severe risk for more than 24 million people from the plains into the southern Great Lakes, including Chicago and Indianapolis. Dew points climb into the 60s and 70s ahead of the front, and winds change speed and direction with height in a way that can organize those late-day clusters into isolated wind producers capable of 60-mile-per-hour gusts. And if you're a traveler, keep an eye on your flights, because the aviation system across the Midwest has already been strained this week, and more storms rolling over major hubs is the last thing an overloaded network needs. That's exactly the kind of ripple effect that turns a regional storm into a national travel headache. Now, let me pause here, because I'm genuinely curious about something and I want to hear from you. I'm trying a more detailed day-by-day style with this forecast, rather than zooming in on just one event. Does that format work better for you, or do you prefer when I focus tightly on a single big threat? Drop a comment and let me know, because your feedback genuinely shapes how I build these, and I want to make them as useful as possible for the way you actually watch. All right, day by day, we finally arrive at Monday, and this is the day to circle. Remember that single severe weather box I opened with? This is it. The Storm Prediction Center has hoisted a 15% severe risk for more than 26 million people from northern Illinois into western Pennsylvania, and that pulls in Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. For an outlook reaching this far ahead, that's a loud signal. It's the only highlighted severe zone anywhere in the entire 4 to 8 day window, which tells you the forecasters have real confidence something organized is coming together here. When everything else on the national map is quiet and one region gets singled out days in advance, that's the region you plan around. Let me explain why that corridor is favored, because the ingredients tell the story. Winds from the south will be streaming up off the plains, pumping dew points into the mid to upper 70s across the whole zone. That's genuinely tropical, swampy air, and it's the fuel that powers everything that follows. Northern Illinois into western Pennsylvania becomes the favored area because that's where the low-level winds are strongest, and that's where storms are most likely to converge and organize. Winds high up run around 60 miles per hour, which is plenty of shear to briefly spin up supercells early on. Then as the afternoon wears on, those storms tend to merge into lines and clusters. The headline hazard here is damaging wind. With those strong upper-level winds essentially aimed downward toward the surface, any cluster that forms can bow out into a line capable of producing widespread damaging gusts. The prime window looks like afternoon into evening. So if you've got a Monday night ball game, an outdoor dinner planned, or a boat out on Lake Michigan, make sure you have a quick and reliable way to get indoors, because when these storms fire, they can turn wild fast and with little warning. And I know the very next question on your mind is about your specific city, because it always is. Right now, eastern Nebraska and Iowa look thinner on coverage, and the sharpest focus stays north of a line through Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and St. Louis. That northern zone is where I think the best storm chances live at the moment. But this is days out, and I'll refine it as we get closer, because the details will shift. There's real uncertainty baked into Monday, and I want to be honest about it rather than oversell. Sunday night's overnight complex of storms could leave behind clouds and outflow that mess with where and how Monday's storms fire. If those clouds clear out and the sun breaks through Monday, the atmosphere destabilizes and the ceiling on this event gets high. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see this upgraded to an enhanced risk as we get closer. That's the range we're dealing with, from a solid wind threat on the low end to something more significant if everything aligns. Now, while all eyes are on Monday's storms, don't lose track of that long front draped across the northern tier, because it's the other half of the story. It slowly starts drifting south on Monday, nudged along by the outflow from each night's storms. Heavy rain concentrates along that boundary, and this kicks off a multi-day rain event for the Ohio Valley and central Appalachians, especially Monday through Wednesday. We're talking local totals of 2 to 4 inches where storms repeat, and potentially more in a few unlucky spots. And here is where I get genuinely concerned, because geography matters enormously. In the hills of eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, that water has only one place to go. This is steep terrain, and we have seen far too many times what repeat downpours can do there. Rain that falls on the ridges funnels straight down into narrow creeks and hollows, and those creeks can rise with terrifying speed, putting water across valley roads in what feels like minutes. This region has suffered devastating, deadly flash floods before, and the setup this week has some of the same fingerprints. If you live in those valleys, this is the part of the forecast I want you paying closest attention to. Know your escape route to higher ground, and never, ever drive into water across a road because you cannot judge its depth or whether the road beneath it has even washed away. Meanwhile, down south, the ridge over the southwest slides a little to the east, and that reopens the moisture pipeline from the Gulf into the southern plains and southeast. That's the leading edge of the next heat wave, and it's a big one. We're talking heat index values of 105 to 115 for Gulf cities and across the southeast, while Oklahoma and North Texas run somewhere between 100 and 105 in actual air temperature. This is the kind of heat that doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it becomes a genuine health hazard. Then Tuesday, the front sags down into the northern Ohio Valley, while the pocket of best storm fuel hangs back farther west near Omaha. Scattered storms fire near that boundary in the afternoon and evening with an isolated severe threat. But honestly, the predictability is too low to pin down exactly where the worst storm set up this far out, so I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What I am confident about is that heavy rain keeps rolling over the Ohio Valley and Appalachians with 1 inch to 2 inches of moisture overhead. When you're under one of these storms, you'll notice the rain falls harder than a typical summer shower, and that's because the atmosphere is simply holding far more water than usual. Every drop that comes down is landing on ground that's already had days to saturate, and that southern heat just keeps building. Tuesday brings feels-like temperatures of 105 to 115. Oklahoma stays in the triple digits, and here's the detail that makes heat truly dangerous. Overnight lows only drop into the 70s, which means houses never really cool off between days. That relentlessness is what makes heat waves deadly, because the human body needs a nighttime break to recover, and it never gets one. This hits the most vulnerable hardest: the elderly, the very young, outdoor workers, and anyone without reliable air conditioning. So please, check on your people. A 2-minute knock on a neighbor's door genuinely saves lives during stretches like this. There's a bit of good news on Wednesday, though. The rain window for the Ohio Valley and Appalachians is on its last well-supported day. There's one more round of rain, but this looks like the tail end of the deluge. That said, localized flooding stays firmly in play because after Monday and Tuesday, the ground is a fully saturated sponge. At that point, even a single inch of rain can cause real problems, since there's simply nowhere left for the water to soak in. There's some energy around for severe thunderstorms too, but confidence is still too low to draw a quarter on the map. The southern heat, meanwhile, refuses to budge. Same sticky, no-relief overnights, and by this point, the cumulative grind is really wearing on anyone living without decent cooling. Wednesday is going to be a rough one across the south. And out west, moisture surges back in for what could be the most active monsoon stretch of the entire summer, with flooding concerns even reaching down into the Phoenix metro area, which is a serious situation in a place built to shed water fast rather than absorb it. Now, we keep going day by day, but I have to be straight with you about something. The farther out we look, the murkier the forecast gets, and any honest forecaster will tell you that. For Thursday and Friday, we're looking at a moist, unstable air mass covering much of the eastern half of the country, from the plains down into the southeast and across the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. With only weak, large-scale support to organize things, this becomes your classic pop-up August thunderstorm pattern, the kind where one part of town gets soaked while a neighborhood 2 miles away stays completely dry. We get this every August, but this is shaping up to be near the peak of it. The bigger late-week story is an air mass flip. Cooler Canadian air spills into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, dropping highs into the 70s and lows into the 50s. After the heat and humidity, a lot of people up there are going to welcome that with open arms. It's a genuine reset for the northern tier, even as the south stays locked in the oven. And let me stretch this out even further, because I know some of you plan a week or two ahead. Looking at the window from roughly August 14th through the 20th, the Climate Prediction Center has posted a moderate risk of extreme heat from the southern and central plains through the lower Mississippi Valley and into the southeast, centered on that Saturday through Monday stretch around the 15th to the 17th. A moderate risk at that range means there's a meaningfully elevated chance of heat climbing into the top tier of what's normal for the season. In plain terms, it's going to be seriously hot. Heat index values stay in that 105 to 115 range across the southeast, with a number of spots flirting with record warm overnight lows, which again is the truly dangerous part. At the same time, there's a slight risk of heavy rain from the desert southwest and the Rockies into the plains and even into the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, running from about the 14th through the 17th. Arizona in particular leans much wetter than normal, and across parts of the Midwest, 3-day totals over an inch look increasingly likely. And here's a genuine silver lining in all of this, because not every headline is bad. That rain is welcome news for Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming, which are dealing with significant drought right now. For farmers and ranchers in those states, a good soaking rain is exactly what they've been praying for, and it's a reminder that the same atmosphere that threatens one region can rescue another. So let me pull this whole week together, because when you zoom out, the logic is actually clean, and it helps everything make sense. We have an active jet stream firing storm after storm across the northern and eastern states, and a slowly southward sinking front that drags the heavy rain and severe threat along with it, day by day. Monday is the sharpest severe day, focused on that Chicago to Pittsburgh corridor. The Ohio Valley and Appalachians take a multi-day soaking Monday through Wednesday, with the steep terrain of Kentucky and West Virginia most at risk for dangerous flash flooding. The South bakes under a building heat wave that only intensifies as the week goes on, with no overnight relief. And then late in the week, the North gets a cool, refreshing reset while the South stays trapped in the heat, with an even bigger heat threat looming in the following week. Storms, floods, and heat, all in motion at once, all connected by that same front and that same jet stream. That's genuinely what makes a week like this worth breaking down carefully. It isn't one story. It's several overlapping stories, and depending on where you live, a completely different one applies to you. Someone in Milwaukee is bracing for wind. Someone in eastern Kentucky is watching the creeks. Someone in Oklahoma is trying to survive the heat. And someone in Minnesota is having one of the best weekends of the summer. All of it at the same time in the same country. Before I wrap up, let me leave you with the practical takeaways, because a forecast only matters if it helps you make a better decision. If you're anywhere in that overnight storm zone across the plains in Missouri Valley, make sure you have a way to get warnings that will wake you up and stay alert for flash flooding on saturated ground. If you're in the Chicago to Pittsburgh corridor, treat Monday afternoon and evening as your window for damaging wind and have a fast way to get indoors. If you live in the valleys and hollows of the central Appalachians, this is your week to be especially cautious, to know your route to higher ground, and to turn around rather than drive through any flooded road. And if you're anywhere in the southern heat, hydrate constantly, avoid the hottest hours, and check on the people around you who are most at risk, because heat is a quiet killer that never gets the dramatic footage it deserves. And I'll be honest about the uncertainty, because you deserve that. The near-term details, today and tomorrow, I'm confident in. Monday has a high ceiling, but still has some wiggle room depending on Sunday night storms. The midweek rain and heat are well supported, and the longer-range outlook toward the middle of the month is a signal, not a certainty, so treat it as a heads-up rather than a promise. As always, I'll update you as the picture sharpens, because in a pattern this active, the forecast can shift meaningfully from one day to the next, and catching those shifts early is the whole point of following along. So that's the full day-by-day breakdown. If this helped you get a clear picture of a genuinely complicated week, do me a quick favor and hit that like button, because it truly helps more people find these forecasts when they need them most. If you're new here, subscribe to W for weather and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when Monday's setup comes into sharper focus and when that mid-month heat threat firms up. And drop your thoughts in the comments, whether it's about the day-by-day format or which part of this week concerns you most, because this community is genuinely one of the best parts of doing this. Stay weather aware out there, look out for one another, and I'll see you in the next one.